Hello, and welcome to Gaston Spotlight. I'm Jay Bergen, your host for today. Joining me is Alan Easton, a veteran camera operator from the TV and film industry. How are you today, Alan?
Doing great, excited about being here.
Thank you. Tell us a little bit about your background. How did you get started in the film industry?
My background started as a still photographer coming out of college. I was invited to work on a motion picture and found that it was a lot more exciting working with 30 or 40 people than it was working by myself in a photo studio shooting plants and plates and dishes, which is what I started off doing.
Your career spans from 1977 to 2020, 43 years of filming. What were your favorite shows? I have some shows up here that you worked on, and then also some movies as well on the next slide. There we go. There are the movies. So you worked on a lot of movies, but that's just 4 of them. What were your favorite ones, if you can pick some?
Well, I have 2 different parts of my career. The first part was as a camera assistant, and as you had on the first picture up, were all the shows that I worked as a camera assistant. The camera assistant at that time was responsible for building the camera in the morning, loading the film, and also doing focus and zooming and moving the camera from location to location. My later years became a camera operator, which is the movies you have up now, other than the Karate Kid. But on those, my responsibility was actually filming it and working with the entire crew, not only working with the grips and electricians and sound department, but also working with the actors and the directors and helping design and making sure the shots were completed, and there weren't things like lights in the setup that I didn't see booms. I was responsible for everything that happened within that frame, and part of that job was keeping everything out, as well as making sure that the lighting and the performance was captured in the camera as they wanted.
Wow, that's a lot to do for an assistant. I have a picture up here of when you were you're there on the far right as an assistant for the Karate Kid, and those were film cameras, right? So you would load the film.
Yeah, this is a 35 millimeter camera, which is hard to see. It was a Panavision camera. The person you see sitting next to me or operating the camera is a guy named John Avildsen. He was the director. He was also the director on the movie Rocky. So he had come in with a lot of background stuff, and working with Pat Morita and Ralph Macchio was probably my first big film that did really well. And again, my responsibility is the focus and the zoom and making sure the camera's running.
So when you moved up to the camera operator, how was that different from the cameraman? As
a camera assistant, they didn't really want to hear my opinion very much on the set about shot designs or stuff. But as a camera operator, I became a lot more involved in how the camera moved, what the interpretation of what the director was, and I would be able to add ideas or suggest things as well as to communicate to the actors many times on what the director was trying to do. If there was trouble, if the shots weren't working, my job was to be able to try to correct it and to make it work for that particular scene.
So if the director said to do something and it didn't quite work, you had the initiative or the authority to make some small changes to make it work?
Authority is an interesting. I was more like trying to facilitate that between the actor and the director of photography, that to make the shot and the scene work better. So you had a certain amount of power, but it was more about how to use that politics to make it a better and to keep the production moving. When you're filming, just like we're doing today, it's about time and money, and so it's always the constant to get the shot done right, but to keep the scene and the production moving along.
Before the 2010s, the film industry used 35mm cameras. Many of the films you worked on were filmed with the Panavision Panaflex or similar cameras. Did you prefer using the Panaflex over the modern cameras? What were the pros and cons of using the film?
The camera you're looking at here is a 35mm Panaflex camera with a zoom lens on it, sitting on top of a whirl head. A whirl head allows you to pan and tilt using wheels to control it. The film, the amount of film that runs through that camera only runs for 11 minutes if you're running at 24 frames a second, which is the standard for the shooting. One of the big differences of the video cameras now is you can run as long as the size of memory that your chip has. You can run 20 minutes, you can run an hour. One of the things that a lot of crews and even the actors complain about today is that the videos can just keep running. So a director will say, oh, that was fine, okay, keep rolling, let's go back to 1. And we do it again, okay, fine, let's do it again. And never stopping to talk, or maybe makeup needs to come in and adjust. Also, the light sensitivity of film, you need a considerably more amount of light to expose the film. Video cameras today don't need nearly as much light, and it allows you to shoot with less amount of cabling and generator systems to create a product.
So it was a much bigger setup than it would be today with the film cameras?
It could, yeah, because to come in to do a scene like you and I were doing would be much bigger lights, because the speed of the film was so much slower. You needed a lot more light, which created heat. And one of the also things we would run into a lot of times after a certain amount of minutes, you start seeing sweat running down the actors. So we'd have to cut, and we'd come in and they would mop everybody down and readjust and start back up again. With the advent of the video, with needing less amount of light and less amount of heat, you found that some of those problems didn't exist as much as they did back then.
Did you ever meet the actors or the staff during your shoots? Do you have any good stories?
Good story.
Like you were these two?
Well, Kathy Bates, I worked on this particular slide you have up was on American Horror Stories Hotel. Kathy Bates was incredible. Once Kathy understood and realized that I worked hard for her, that I was always making sure that she looked great, the lighting was great, the angles were good. She would do everything for me. We had a great time. Lady Gaga was one of her first times ever working on a film. She had done a lot of music videos, as we know, but in film, it's repeating the same action over and over for multiple angles. Here we've got 3 cameras. Quite often we would just use 1 or 2. So once we do a master shot, we'd have to relight it and do an over the shoulder and come back on another over shoulder. So she had to repeat it, and it was a learning process for her. And of course, as we saw in her last movie, she learned quite a bit from that. But this was my first experience with her. So I tend to find that I try to become involved in the sense of getting close to my actors and to my director, because then it allows better communication for me to either give somebody, if something's not working, to give them a piece of advice that might help, or even to help change something to make them look better, to make the shot work better.
Cool. Did you have a crew that you worked with often, and did you see your friends as you went on in the industry?
Yeah, it's interesting here. There are some guys in here that I worked with for 35, 40 years.
This was Karate Kid.
This is the first Karate Kid. So this is 1983. Is that right?
Yeah,
something like that.
I think it's 83. Yeah.
Most of these guys I worked with for years and years and years. Unfortunately, a number of them have passed away, but most of these were a lot of these guys became very heavy hitters in the film business. You tended to try to work with people that you got along with well, that had the same kind of personalities and had the same kind of drive in creating a great shot, and always looking for the best all the time. You didn't want you wanted people to show up on time to work. You wanted people that always kept the enthusiasm throughout the day. Our days are long. Our days are 12 or 14-hour days. So you needed people that were really with you and working hard to make the product.
Do you have any advice for people that want to be a camera assistant or camera operator that are entering this industry today?
It's a great job. It's a lot of work. Well, I learned real quickly as I was trying to get into the world that I tried to volunteer whenever I could. I'd go knock on doors. I volunteered on low budget, non-union. I volunteered on no money shots. So I started to learn the craft and meet people. I also was fortunate to work in the area that there was a lot of filmmaking going on. When you go into smaller towns, if you live in, it's harder to find more and more production being done. Not sure if I got the question. It's a great business, but it's a hard work to get in that door and keep pushing.
So, would you suggest people? How would you suggest people start out to work up to?
Well, I think, for instance, a lot of the stuff that you're learning here is wonderful because you're experiencing being on a set. You're looking at lighting. You're looking at camera. I guess if I was living here in Charlotte, I would be looking for places like Atlanta or Los Angeles, places that the film industry is bigger, is larger, that has more opportunity. The amount of, unfortunately, a lot of the shows now chase tax credits when they go into places. North Carolina had a tax credit for a lot of years. They used to do a lot of television and movies here. The tax credit went away, production left. Atlanta has become the huge, big area. New York, of course, is very big. Chicago is big. Los Angeles is big. It's a lot. It's having a background though of being around cameras, being around lights, being around people will certainly help as you go knocking on those doors and working your way into it, taking advantage of when someone introduces you. You push, you go in, you volunteer, you show up, you bring coffee, you pick up lunches. I've done all of that as my career was gaining.
Thank you for joining us today, Alan. This is Jay Bergen signing off from Gaston Spotlight. See you next time.